Hello friends, fam, enlightened beings, hardcore yogi here. Please excuse me, I just need to open up my hips a little bit. It's just some weird yogi shit. When you become a yogi, you will understand. It's all about getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. So anyway, the topic of this video, it is the 3 major enlightenment experiences, at least in my opinion and in my experience. So I'll first just list them, 1, 2, 3, so you have an overview, and then we will elaborate a little bit on each one. So the first one is the end of suffering. Even if it's temporary, the end of suffering. The second one is to experience pure consciousness or no self. Then the third one is to experience the fullness of God and absolute infinity. So let us now dive into what each of these are like in an experience. So tapping into the first one, which is the end of suffering. The Buddha himself defined enlightenment as the end of suffering. Martin W. Ball, who wrote the book Being Infinite, he said something similar when he said that enlightenment is to be free of the illusory nature of the ego and to maintain an awareness of the true nature of the self. I'm just going to hydrate slightly. Yes, now, so the Buddha said the end of suffering. Martin W. Ball said free from the ego, the illusory nature of the ego. So here is where I wish to say that the ego is often tied up with 3 main things, which is attachment, falsehood, and suffering. So it is the ego is like the thoughts which say something like, I need this to be a certain way, attachment. Otherwise the consequence is going to be really bad, falsehood. And so I will suffer until I get it my way, suffering. So once again, it is about attachment, falsehood, and suffering. It is about those thoughts which sound like, I need to have it this way, or the consequence is going to be really bad, so I'm going to suffer right now until I get in my way. So that is basically some key functions of the ego. And the thing is that it is often our false assumptions which cause our suffering. Rumi, the ancient spiritual poet, he once said, "What is false hurts the heart, yet the truth brings joyous tranquility." Byron Katy said something similar when she said, reality is often much kinder than the stories we tell. So it is a key thing to realize that our thoughts which are false, rooted in false assumption, they are the ones which hurt and cause suffering. So when such thoughts come up, it is good to either transcend them or to address them and resolve them. So if a certain thought comes up which hurts you, you can then ask, okay, that thought hurts. What is false about this which hurts? Where is the falsehood here? And then, what is the truth of the matter? And you will realize that the truth is that which makes you feel good. So that's the first aspect of, coming back to that also. So with this definition of enlightenment as being the end of suffering, anyone can be enlightened in a moment where they are not suffering. But then, if and when the mind kicks up again and has thoughts which create suffering, we are back in the dark ages of the ego. But that is okay if we realize it. Then we address it directly resolvent, transcendent, then back in a state of non-suffering, the feel-goodness of the truth, that is a state of enlightenment once again. So always untie your falsehoods. The second enlightenment experience is to experience pure consciousness, or the no self. So this can be done with a certain exercise from a few different spiritual traditions, which is called neti neti. That translates into not this, not that. So in this exercise, you put your awareness or your focus on different objects within your experience. It could be a part of the body, it could be a feeling, it could be a thought. But whatever it is, you can look at an object in your experience and say, is that me? Is that me? And the answer is always neti neti. Not this, not that. Because any object that you can point to in your experience, whether it's a thought, feeling, object, whatever, it is not truly you, because that object could be removed and you would remain. So the term no self often gets used here, which is pointing to the pure, empty, just the pure, empty awareness which dwells behind each object that we experience. Ultimately, the no self points to pure awareness because it has no qualities or form apart from the faculty of awareness. So whenever any object pops up in your experience, especially an object that you dislike, or just any object, but especially one you dislike, always remember, it is not you, for it will come and go, but the true self remains. And the true self is that nothingness and that no self, that pure consciousness. So that's another example, or the second major enlightenment experience, to experience the no self or the pure consciousness. Then the third and final major enlightenment experience is to experience the fullness of God or absolute infinity. So it's kind of the opposite to the last one, and I'll explain why. So one can experience the fullness of God or no self when they have an ego death. So an ego death can happen via various different means, various different paths. So like deep meditation, yoga, ecstatic dance, then go lay on the floor, on a yoga mat, more comfortable, or even psychedelic plant medicines. What these experiences create is an ego death is when the human falls away. You leave your human behind. And then you experience the fullness of the pure white light. So the pure white light, it is formless. It has no coordinates. It's not grounded to anything or bound by anything. But yet, this formless light is more alive and vibrant and powerful and happy than the fractured world of the forms. And in the pure white light, there is the knowing of I am. The pure white light, it is like a full cup. It is the infinite fertility of existence. It is the pure reservoir of infinite cosmic energy condensed before it then comes down into a form. And in a sense, the pure white light is God. And God has two major facets, which is that fullness of the pure white light, and then the emptiness and the darkness, the void of the formless. So the formless both has the nothingness, which we described as the no self, but then it has the full radiant energy of God. And in between that darkness and the light, there's then many different variations of color, feeling, sound, vibration. The whole universe dwells between these two, the infinite void and the infinite light. And as I said, ultimately you can experience each of these through deep meditation, trance states, yoga, ecstatic dance, breath work as well, and then psychedelic plant medicine obviously can be a good tool. And in my experience, you see, I don't live in those states super often, but I believe you only need to experience the absolute fullness of those realities in order to just gain the recognition that this life has a lot of value. There is true value in this life because it is fueled by infinite power and infinite love. So those, the highest transcendent states, you can come back into your more human reality and you recognize that the human reality, it does have such value. So then you have more like motivation and fuel to sort of iron out the kinks of the more human aspects of your mind and your body. You realize that if you can just clear out and remove the imperfect sort of toxins, just the impurities in our mind, in our body, in our heart, if we just remove those tensions, which often are suffering, as we mentioned, the ego is based on suffering and falsehood. If we can untie those kinks of falsehood and attachment and suffering, clinging on, if we can remove those human imperfections that we have, then we can just experience the fullness of cosmic energy. We can just be in touch with pure awareness and pure energy. Because I believe that perfection is not when nothing more can be added, but it's when nothing more can be taken away. When we remove all the sources of suffering and attachment and pain, then we become empty. And Lao Tzu once said, before you can become full, you must become empty. So if you can become empty of suffering, even for a temporary amount of time, you can become full of energy. Because that is our nature, to be a channel for the energy that is here. So that sums up my 3 main enlightenment experiences. One is the end of suffering. One is to experience the no self and the void of nothingness. And then 3 is to experience the fullness of God and infinite light, the pure power and potential. That's the 3 main experiences of enlightenment for me. I'm Hardcore Yogi, wishing you so much love, so much true knowledge and goodness on this journey. This is how we get after it. Namaste.